Hello and welcome all. This is our third episode of Young Energy Talks. And as always, it is a huge pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the International Geothermal Association. My name is Mari Brommer. I'm the CEO of the IGA. And it is of huge importance, but also an honor to facilitate discussions between our youth, our youth committee members as well, and our youth forum. And our senior executive leadership from all over the world, and today represented by two very influential people. At one side, representing the youth, we have Cecilia Rodriguez, and I'll come back to Cecilia in a sec, where she can introduce herself. But also Malcolm Ross, representing the executive senior leadership within the global geothermal industry. As always, this is recorded, and hence we are live at the moment. For those of you who are joining us, a warm welcome, good morning, good day, good afternoon, maybe sometimes even good night. But also if you are following this remotely or reviewing this on the pre-recording, thank you very much for joining us. Those who are joining live, you can ask questions. The first half of this episode is, as always, a guided conversation between the two panelists. But after that, there's time for questions. And do not hesitate to ask your questions in the chat. We have a chat function for you where you can type your questions to both or maybe to one of our panelists. And we're happy to facilitate that conversation with your written questions. No waiting, I think let's dive in. Cecilia, I move first to you for your short introduction. Who you are and what you represent. Over to you, Cecilia.
Thank you, Marit. And hello, Malcolm. And hello, everyone. So yes, my name is Cecilia Rodriguez. I am from Mexico. And I'm very happy to be here, very honored to be invited. And hopefully our talk is entertaining and enlightening, hopefully, for some people. I studied engineering here in Mexico, geophysical engineering. And then I went to New Zealand to do my master's in renewable energy and my PhD in geothermal exploration using remote sensing. And I've been back in Mexico for the last 2 years now. And now I am co-founder of a company called NRU, where we try to, capacitate and educate more people about renewable energies and sustainability. So we can talk a bit more about that later. And I am also working together with IGA to try and push forward, the geothermal agenda in LATAM. So yes, that's basically me.
Super, thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have you and also representing the wider LATAM region. It is a region of interest for all of us, but specifically for our younger members, we see there is such an interest to learn more, to grow, but also interest in helping them navigate their career, both from a student point of view, but also the young professionals. So very excited to have you here. Malcolm, over to you for your short introduction.
Sure, thank you. Good day, everyone. And thank you, Marit and Cecilia, for the opportunity to chat with you. I've had a varied career. Probably can't be a short introduction if I talk about my whole career. So I'll just talk about the last bit. My current title is called Geothermal Evangelist. My efforts are to try to advance geothermal in the world in whatever way that I can. So what that entails is teaching. I just last night at midnight wrapped up my semester at University of Texas, where I teach fundamentals of geothermal course. I teach at Rice University, where I also teach geothermal and also GIS. I lobby at the state and federal level for geothermal energy matters, and I help startups with strategy and introductions and networking and so on. And I make a lot of presentations, and ones like this. So I chose that title in particular, evangelist, because it's something that's memorable. And if you know anything about me, I've had a series of memorable titles. When I was at Shell, I had a title called Game Changer. I won't go into the details of what a game changer was, but when you handed someone a business card that said game changer, their first question was, what's that? And you have a conversation. The next title I had was Black Swan Detector. I can explain that if you're interested, but that was on a business card. People said, what's that? Now I say geothermal evangelist, they ask, what's that? What I'm trying to relay is that having a title and a business card that stirs a conversation rather than just says research scientist or geologist or whatever, I think is very important. It makes you memorable to the people you talk to, and it starts that conversation. So that's my first piece of a little advice, trick is, I don't know if it's putting puppies and kitty cats on your business card to stir a conversation or what, but having something on the business card that causes people to have a memory tag about you is always a good career thing. And I think one of the reasons, Merit knows me is that I have that series of memorable titles. And that has helped, the process of my career. So I think that's enough for now.
Fantastic. And yes, to already inserting those small tips and tricks. I think for all of you out there, listen to Malcolm when it's about starting a conversation, because I think this is so true. This is so true. Starting a conversation and standing out of the crowd, if you like, even when it is just about a business card, is super important. And yes, I know Malcolm already quite some while now, and you have these funny names and these very interesting names, and we'll definitely zoom in a little bit more later in this conversation, because I think everyone is quite excited when we talk about how to find the next geothermal, let's say, a project, and hence the Black Swan detector is something that I would be very interested in. In your role at Shell at that time. Maybe elaborate a little bit on it. But thanks, Malcolm. It is such a pleasure to have you on board, and I appreciate for both of you. By the way, it is very early in the morning, so that's another big honor for us to have you here.
No problem.
I would like to start with maybe the bigger purpose of IGA reason and hence the purpose of why we are doing this and why we are facilitating these conversations is because we have really been overwhelmed with the requests from our younger members of the community globally. This is not just in one particular region, but globally, to make this happen, right? To make their voices heard and to facilitate discussions between the youth and the more seniors, but also between those who are still navigating their career and those who have navigated their career. And at the same time, bringing an umbrella function towards understanding what's the state of play of geothermal, where to move into. I am a geoscientist. What would be a next step for me to take? But equally learning more from our industry executives, focus on this side of your capabilities, or try to stand out from the crowd, as Malcolm just said, by doing this kind of thing. So there is an appetite for knowledge, there is an appetite for technology, but there is definitely an appetite for capacity building in the largest form. Hence, maybe Cecilia, representing also our younger members here, especially, of course, the LATAM region, can you maybe explain to us or picture the scene of the LATAM community, where it stands, where it wants to go to, and how structured conversations about navigating that career is important for the LATAM-based geothermal community?
Yeah, of course. So going back a little bit on how I formed myself. So I did a geophysical engineering, and I didn't really have one semester where I got taught anything of geothermal. So I feel that says a lot. And just recently I went to my university, back to my university with NRU, like to promote NRU, and nobody knew what geothermal was. And this is like 8 years after. So I was hoping to see some sort of change. So I feel that's part of the problem. Like you said, we should start in kindergarten, right? But there hasn't been changes, and I cannot speak for all the countries. I did a little questionnaire online, and there were a lot of people from Colombia and some from Salvador, and I said it was for young geothermal people. And that's exactly the thing. Like when I asked them, where do they get their knowledge right now? It's from webinars and courses, and it's not in the basic education, let's call it. So there has to be a shift there, because also when they finish, one of the big problems is that they feel there's a lack of opportunity, not only of teaching, but of opportunities once they finish. Like you finish and you don't really know where you're gonna go or where you can fit, right? And we get this, we are the future, the young people, but I think we're all the present, and we have to focus on today. So I feel the Latin American young people that are already interested in geothermal, we don't quite see where we fit. We don't feel there's opportunities. And I get the feeling that this is quite worldwide, no? And sometimes if you have an idea, maybe you don't know where to find the funding.
Yeah.
So that I would kind of summarize it like that.
Right. Just for clarification, your university is Mexico City, right? Yes, exactly. So 8 years ago you graduated and you went back, and there is still no real geothermal, let's say, course or whatever type of educational instrument at the university. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's right. Like my whole career was focused in oil.
Yeah. Yes, not surprising, of course, but no, I get that. And what you're saying is that you see this observation within the wider LATAM community, as in the countries that have geothermal, for instance, El Salvador, Costa Rica, they don't teach geothermal at the university?
Yeah, I do get that feeling. Like I just gave a course this year for a Colombian university where a student is starting and it's looking for teachers from around the world to give courses online for this little group of people that's interested. So I feel there's a worldwide need for this teaching and capacitation, training, all these things. So we can finish and we feel we are ready
As you are
to
equipped.
join the force.
Yes. Yes. I'll come back to you on the opportunity, because even when you are then graduated and even when there may be some good geothermal courses, then what, right? That's the next step. But maybe first, Malcolm, because I know you're teaching, you already said it in your introduction as well, you're teaching. And well, I know in 2 universities at least. When you hear this, right, this is not good. Obviously, this is not good. But how did you manage to get geothermal in those 2 respective universities? Because I bet it wasn't there 8 years ago either.
Yes, these are the first 2 courses, fundamentals of geothermal courses, that have been taught at these universities ever. And so I did it because, number one, I'm an alumni of Rice University and I'm close to the chair of the department, and I had a personal relationship. And I actually taught for 10 years at Rice University, taught GIS courses. So they trusted me and I made this recommendation, and it was a personal connection that made it happen. I'm also an alumni of University of Texas, and the chairman of the department was my daughter's PhD advisor, and I approached him, and again, personal connection is what made the course selection happen. But it's had an interesting effect, and I've noticed this. I gave the final exam last week. And I've seen this when I go and give lectures. Like I said, I give many presentations around the country at the university level, and almost every time I have at least one person come up to me and say, "Wow, geothermal, that's cool. I didn't even know it existed as a career option." And I had several of my students come up to me last week to say, "You know what? I came in here on the oil and gas track, and I'm going to pivot to geothermal thanks to your course." Okay, and I think that says something, that students are coming in thinking they're going down the oil and gas track, and have the capability to pivot, or at least early in their educational process. But the problem that we have, I believe, is that if you look at the enrollments at these geology departments, geoscience departments around the world, they are in substantial decline. And I've done some statistics now. I've talked to several folks at different universities about that, and the number of students signing up for geology course majors is in decline, and I believe that's because of the association with extractive industries, the oil and gas, coal, and mining in general has suffered reputationally. And what a lot of students have told me is they feel what I call a cognitive dissonance. In their head, they have difficulty balancing the culture that they've grown up in around not damaging the environment, sustainability, global warming, all of that. They can't reconcile that in their head with a career in oil and gas.
No.
And I think that's responsible for the decline. And that's why when Merritt and I had this conversation, we talked about getting started with these people to show them that there are opportunity in the geosciences not associated with the things that they feel guilty about, but rather doing geothermal, doing CCUS, doing hydrogen storage, there's lots of new things to do in the geosciences that they just aren't aware of. And so I brought this idea to Merritt that we try to get into those secondary schools, mostly before students, because in many universities now, you're required to declare your major even before you get there. So
Right.
as a junior and a senior, the last couple of years of your secondary education, you're trying to make choices for your life based on very little information. And so my thought was, we need to get out in front of these students and say, hey, you know what? These are these other alternatives out here. You can do geoscience. You can go out in the field and do mapping and be have an outdoorsy kind of career, the kind of thing that, make geosciences seem interesting. And you can do it and to the good of the planet. Merritt, I think, agreed that it would be a good idea to do this with, maybe we'll call them early career rather than youth. I always think youth maybe implies a little bit too young, but anyway, early career in front of these younger students, because I think there's more of a connection. A gray-haired old dude like me is not going to resonate to
Sorry, Malcolm.
a nice fresh face like Cecilia's, and so that's really what the agenda for me here is, to help prepare content for going out to students and doing stuff that will resonate with them, desktop experiments or whatever it is, but just get them even thinking that there is alternatives in the geosciences other than extractive industry stuff.
Yes, very well point, and also well noted on the youth. Interesting. Early career committee sounds maybe better than the youth committee. So let's bounce this back to our youth members. 2 points you make, and I come to the educational bit on high schools in a sec. But first on the personal connection, because Cecilia, this is very interesting, right? I mean, look at Malcolm, right? He has 2 personal connections, and hence there are now geothermal courses. Now, I wish to live in a world where it is not just about personal connections and that geothermal just becomes mainstream. But I guess before we are mainstream, we need to have these personal connections. When you hear this, right? When you hear this and you know the landscape in LATAM, first of all, who can we, let's say, win for us when it comes down to the personal connections and make geothermal courses happen in the leading universities? And maybe the second question then, we have to start somewhere. Who is the leading university? Where can we start, right, with introducing these geothermal courses, in your opinion, in LATAM?
Yes. In LATAM, I would say it's the public universities. It's where most of the people go, and it's also probably where there is a disconnect, because many times the people that are in private industries have more reach into knowledge. So maybe some of them already know more about renewable energies already, whereas many people that go into public university, like the one I went to, might have no idea and have just heard of solar and eolic because it's what you see, right? So I would say we have to start in public universities. The problem with that is that there's a lot of bureaucracy, and it's very slow sometimes to add a course, modify a career. Of course, it takes years, right? And it hasn't happened yet. So I don't know if they're in the process of doing it. So probably it's just trying to get an appointment, which is something we're sort of doing with NRU, try to get appointments with the career directors. And talk to them about it, like your students need to know about this, because it will give them more opportunities in the future if they are ready for the job offerings that will come, right? Maybe in some years, knowing everything about oil, it's transferable, but it's better to know more about geothermal already, or more about CCUS, like Malcolm said, right? There's a lot of things to do within the geoscience.
Yeah.
So I think it's the public universities,
Yeah.
and maybe we don't need to change completely a career. We just need to add a course, right? I was talking about this with a friend yesterday, that we need to push that. We need to push to have either that universities are happy to open the doors to online education,
Yeah.
or that they are happy to include one person that gives just a general course of renewable energies that actually includes all the renewable energies and not just solar and aeolic.
Right. And
And I would also point out that the chair people of these departments recognize the decline, very much recognize the decline in attendance. And I think they'll be amenable to the suggestion of diversifying the pool of opportunities that students can address in their coursework. So I think we will find that the departments are amenable to these suggestions. I would also suggest that I had a university, I guess I can say it, the Colorado School of Mines, which is one of our leading universities in the US for geoscientists, approached me to co-teach a geothermal course, but not necessarily for the students, but for alumni and for the companies that donate to the university, like the oil and gas companies and so on. So the focus is on professionals, all people who are already in the workforce, but retain their connections back to the university. And reputationally, if School of Mines taught a course, it would give them credibility within their workplace to make changes within their workplace and suggest a geothermal department, a geothermal effort, and so on. I think that's an excellent sort of niche that we can also suggest. And by the way, it's a revenue stream for the department. So if they offer this course and each professional who signs up for it pays a certain amount of money, that's a revenue stream. So I think that is an opportunity that we can explain to the chairperson or the committee that decides what courses get taught at departments.
Yeah,
Nice.
if I can add something to this, I would say something that's already happening. For example, here in Mexico, there's a Grupo Idea. I don't know if you guys know it. I think Shirley Marit does. And they offer a course exactly like this, like upskilling. People that are already working on something, are already part of a university, so they can take this course to train themselves in something different. And I would also say that you don't have to wait for your university to create this, right? This course that I taught in Colombia online, the initiative comes from a student. It's Semillero Colombia, and they started it, and they are looking for these people, and they find a way, right? Even if it's online. So I gave GIS, for example, there. So that's another way, I think, just like starting this community yourself amongst people that are sort of interested in these things. Even though we need to find a way to put it at the beginning. That's what I was talking with my friend. We need to do this semester to convince them of this semester, like in semester 1, and that everybody has to take it. And just making a very complete course, right?
Yeah. No, but look, this is also why, Cecilia, your endeavors are so super important, because it's like a grassroots movement, right? If it doesn't come from the top, you have to start from the bottom, and this is what you do. Which what I think is super cool. At the same time, I also think the structured approach towards having access to mainstream geothermal is of course also needed. But as you say, it will come, but maybe gradually. One question, Cecilia, is do you recognize what Malcolm is saying about the decline in geology in general, but maybe geosciences in LATAM? Are people less and less studying geology?
I actually wouldn't know the number. I just saw a comment from Dr. Prol telling us that there is a specialization, and that is true. I don't know since when that specialization has been. So when you finish your career, you can now take a specialization in geothermal at the National University.
Okay.
But I wouldn't know the number. Probably she knows, actually. If you can ask her in the chat, she might know if there has been a decline, because I would just invent a number. I have no clue.
Okay. No, don't invent the number. We are recording this. This is
This is for posterity.
Yeah. Yeah, but Malcolm, you made a fantastic point. It is in decline, and I can only concur with that. And not knowing the number, of course, for LATAM in general, but I can see that there is a genuine worldwide decline in the interest of studying geology or any type of subsurface-related discipline, and that is probably to do with both the purpose of not wanting to work for an hydrocarbon industry or an extractive industry in general, but also because other studies seem more interesting in general. And I think the whole STEM field, by the way, is seeing a little bit of that decline in general, but we cannot solve everything. We only want to work on, let's say, the subsurface from a geothermal / storage point of view. But what can we do, right? You mentioned already high schools and making some noise and inspirational talks. But how can we do that on a structured way? What would be your thoughts on that, Malcolm?
Yeah, I think sorry, pop-up window. There we go. So I think this approach of having material. Well, I'll tell you where this all started. I was sitting in the plenary conference, a plenary session of the Geothermal Rising this year. And there was a lot of hand-wringing, concern about the decline in student enrollment and the problems that might lead to geothermal. I mean, geothermal needs this because if we're going to grow exponentially, which I think we all feel we need to do in order to get the momentum going in the marketplace that's needed, we're going to need staff. The limiting factor of the growth of geothermal is most likely to be people, not technology. And so I think there will be support in the community to deal with it, but there are a lot of people that I don't know what to do. And so why I thought it was a good idea for the IGA Young Professional Committee to help to develop a curriculum was that I would like next year to go out, or even before that, and say, stop wringing your hands and go knock on the door of the elementary school or the high school down the street from where you live. Every geothermal professional can do this. And we're not asking you to prepare a curriculum or experiments, or that will provide you all of that. And we can be a groundswell movement amongst geothermal people to get out and do this. It's not a critical audience. You're not going to get difficult questions. You know, these students know nothing about this. They just want to get excited. And I think we don't want to have necessarily all bearded old white men, you know, droning on about thermodynamics to them. We need to have some catchy, interesting, you know, field photos and all of that to do it. But I think it's really important that it be easy for the people who will make the presentations to just go do it on a Friday. Connect with the guidance counselor or the career development people at these schools and say, hey, I'd like to come in and do this for free, and they will jump on it. I will mention something important. I spoke to a guidance counselor recently. It's actually the spouse of a friend of mine, and they said what they are hearing from even the high school sort of students, one of the first questions that get asked is, what are the salaries like?
Good question.
Surprisingly, but it's a good question. And, you know, in a lot of places, we don't talk about these things. But in the content, I think we need to be able to say, you know, what are the salaries like in particular compared to those extractive industries, and why, if they're not, you know, equal, if they're not competitive, you know, why, and why they might still be attractive, because you don't have this cognitive dissonance and so on. So, you know, from a practical sense, I think we need to be able to talk about that. And I think, as I said, we need to be able to show the job demand. We need to show, here are a bunch of internships. Here's a bunch of employment opportunity. And it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg thing, right? If we don't start to get exponential growth, we won't have the jobs, but we can't get the exponential growth without having the people. You know, there's a whole thing here we've got to work through. But I think it's really important to have structured content that is super easy for our community to get out there and just start on the problem and stop talking.
Yeah.
Yes. If I can add something to
sure.
this, I would say, I don't know in the United States, but at least Latin America, surely Southeast Asia, and probably Africa, I think this content also needs to get out that there's not only electricity generation, and we have to reach the communities that live nearby these type of resources, because sometimes that's what's stopping the development as well. So I would say that's another type of content that needs to get out there. And like you said, it probably has to be from how did you say, the early career people.
Early career, not youth, early career.
Early career, yeah, yes,
Yeah.
exactly, early
Yeah.
career. And also the local people, maybe one is already curious, what else can we do with this hot spring that's here? And if they can see the opportunities, like you said, maybe for them it's not going to be per se a salary, but a business opportunity. I think that's super important for our countries.
Yes, and that is communication in general, right, Cecilia? I mean, it is about creating awareness and raising awareness, but also having access to easy to interpret, structured, I don't know, infographics, material, documents. A nice, readable, digestible two-pager is nicer with some pictures on it than Malcolm explaining thermodynamics too. That's very true. That's
With an
very true.
experiment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. But
I would say the material that we might use in a secondary school is not that far from the material that we might use in the community, because we kind of have to assume a minimum amount of information that even people, doctors, lawyers, whatever the community is made up of, won't know very much about it, and it would be a similar packet of information. So we could kill two birds with one stone. I don't like that analogy, but yeah. Anyways,
But also look, throwing in from my IGA perspective, I also think it is not too dissimilar from, for instance, I was approached now here, so our headquarters is in The Hague in the Netherlands, and I was approached by an advisory board for hospitals. If they could get some information on how geothermal can help becoming more autonomous in their energy, and hence energy independence, energy security for hospitals. Now, hospitals have a very direct, let's say, need, and that is 24/7 energy, right? Electricity and heating and cooling. It needs to be 24/7 available, otherwise patients, well, will suffer and doctors cannot operate. And hence, it becomes a topic of not only advising an advisory board of hospitals on what geothermal can do, it is indeed inspiring people to think not only about electricity only as a source for renewable energy. And I think having that for the layman, whether we are early career or whether we are super senior advisory board members, we need to give more digestible packages of information to inspire everyone around geothermal, if I'm right, right?
Right.
Yeah, and I can expand on that. One of the universities I recently presented at was Western Colorado University in Gunnison, Colorado. And I found out at the meeting that, in fact, the town of Gunnison, okay, Gunnison's not a big place, a couple of thousand people maybe, but they had a member of the Public Works Department, the leader of the Public Works Department, get interested in geothermal based upon online searching, so on, digestible packets of information, that he led an effort. And every municipal building in the city of Gunnison, Colorado is now using geothermal energy. And they are now in the process of converting every library and school to geothermal energy. And I think that's another example where digestible packets of information can make an influence, and you can inspire communities. Well, look, the whole city is doing geothermal. Why can't I? That sort of thing.
Yeah.
And they're seeing really good benefits in terms of security, resilience, all those things. But it's cheaper. It's just flat out cheaper. It's okay. Upfront cost may be high, but in the long run, they're saving money, and that's important to the taxpayers.
For sure. With an eye on the time, if there is anyone in the chat room that want to pose a question to both Cecilia and Malcolm, please do not hesitate. We have time for that. I don't see a question directly now, although the comment indeed around the program. So let me dive into another topic. And Cecilia, you raised it already when you said, okay, so now I'm done. I am in Mexico or in Colombia or in Costa Rica, El Salvador, one of the LATAM community countries. And then what? I'm done. I'm graduated. I have an interest in geothermal. I want to work. or I want to do a secondary, I want to do an internship or whatever. I want to get an employment. The next step, basically. So you already said it's hard, right? It's not easy. That's maybe another way of putting it. But why is that? Why is it not easy in LATAM? Can you tell us a little bit? And maybe I would like to draw the parallel worldwide with Malcolm.
Okay. I think there's probably two factors. One is that getting either a postdoc, doctorate, everything, it requires certain, like applying, you don't really know if you're gonna get. Many people have to get this money as fast as possible as well. Like, you know, you need the money to live and to eat. So in terms of academia, it's probably from there. And in general, speaking from Mexico at least, it's not necessarily an academic path. It's not necessarily seen as average or normal. I don't know how to explain. Like people are like, oh, if someone is a researcher, they're like, oh, and what do they do? You know? So it's not known as well. That's one of the things. And the other, I guess, is that if there's not enough projects, just like Malcolm said, right? It's like a cycle. So if there's not enough projects, there's not enough demand, and then we don't need the offer. And I've seen it with some of my friends, right? They maybe worked in geothermal for a bit, but then that project stopped, and now they work in oil and gas. So that's also something that has to do with the politics. So if our governments are not pushing the geothermal agenda and are not injecting money into it, then sometimes the projects don't happen, and they don't need that much people. So I think that's some of like the two problems. And then also you really don't know, like you really don't know where to go, where to start, because a lot of it is from connections, like you both have mentioned. And it's such a small world that you might not know anyone yet.
Yeah.
So I think that probably giving these conferences, like in many, many places, might expand the knowledge of who you could reach to ask, because it depends a lot on the country, and probably you would need to ask very specific people.
Yeah.
So probably having this in some sort of online resource where you can actually see what type of jobs are related to geothermal. And it might not be in your same country, but maybe it's another country in Latin America which speaks Spanish, and then you can go easily. So I think those are the things, like you really finish, and in academia, some people are like, oh, but what do you work on there? What do you do? And in industry, then maybe there's not enough demand.
Yeah.
Yet, hopefully.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. Remain positive. Remain positive. Yes. I like this analogy because I see it here as well. I see a lot of interest worldwide in geothermal. I see exponentially or not, but we are going to grow. We just pledged for a triple up, and we got it in the final agreement for COP28. That means that we have to deliver as geothermal. Triple up by 2030 means 20,000 wells that need to be drilled per year, approximately. So we need to start working. We need people, for sure. Malcolm, couldn't agree more. We need all those people trained. We need the rigs, we need the permits, we need a lot of education around that entire space. And yet I still feel, especially from the more what we refer to as the global south countries, basically Africa, Southeast and Asia, but also the LATAM community, they don't feel that there is a place for them to work, right? They don't get access to that next tier job. So if you look at the US, Malcolm, and I know you are doing a fantastic job as an evangelist. I think we all need it. We need it in every country, on every level. We need you and the types of you to vouch for and to advocate for geothermal energy. But if you really look in the US, is it easy for young professionals to land a geothermal job?
Not necessarily, no. I think, we are at the very early part of the growth, exponential or otherwise. So that's a plus and a minus, right? Maybe there aren't as many jobs out there right now. It's just a little bit early, but being at the bottom of the curve, getting in the door at the bottom of the curve is better than trying to get in the door at the top of the curve.
Yeah.
So what I would suggest as another sort of tip and trick kind of thing is to upskill yourself with capabilities that are outside of the domain you're interested in. And what I'm thinking of in particular is GIS for example, a very generalized skill applicable across the geosciences, but also social sciences, engineering. That's a skill that can get you a job, at least a consulting gig for a couple of years during the dry periods, between projects, as Cecilia said. Another one might be big data analysis. That's sort of been a hot topic in the past, and now AI, right, is the hot topic. Having skills in those spaces will make you an attractive looking employee for the geothermal companies, but in the interim, it can get you some employment to fill in between as we begin to ramp up and fill the space. I will point out that there is a substantial amount of growth in the startup space, in particular in the United States. Companies like Fervo and Ever and Greenfire, et cetera, are growing rapidly, right? Ever, when I met Ever a couple of years ago, now maybe more like 8 years ago, they were 8 people. Now they're closer to 80. They are growing very rapidly. And so I think you have to be able to put accept the risk of going to work for a startup. Startups fail, right? No doubt about it. But hey, if you have those GIS skills, AI skills, and the company fails, then you just go work for the city for a while and do some mapping of fire hydrants. I don't know what it is, but I think having this sort of spectrum of employable skills is really important. We get in our educational system, at least in the US, this mantra, focus, focus, focus. Don't do anything that distracts. I think that is a mistake, because it doesn't, you can't get work and you're narrow vertical, you're unemployable.
Yeah.
And so I think that having that diversity of skill is very important. I think the other element of what we're talking about, I think it's important, to these this online learning stuff, having a certificate or some kind of legitimacy behind what you're doing is super important. Just doing a free online course that doesn't offer that doesn't mean much to the potential employer. So that's why, for example, the Colorado School of Mines thing is interesting to me, because they will have a certificate of training, or whatever it's called, that these people can then take to their employer and say, hey, look, by the way, I've also done this. So I think that's another important thing, is to, when you do these things, do them in spaces where you'll get fill the box, get a tick mark, so that that you get credit for that, and your employer will appreciate it.
Yeah, good tips, very good tips, and I think that is for all of us out there always good, upskilling, but also not too focused only delivers you the job. I think that is very true, Malcolm. Be as broad as can, and still have, of course, maybe a core that says geothermal or geoscience or reservoir engineering, but be as broad as you can around that core. I think that is a very good tip. Maybe Cecilia...
and I'll just, by the way, bring up the GIS thing again quickly. The Project Interspace just released their GeoMap beta, which is a GIS implementation of geothermal technoeconomics, basically. But it just shows you this utility, this understandability of stuff presented on maps. Makes a lot of sense to people, and I think that's why Project Interspace chose to do that. And that's just an example of how useful that skill set is.
Yeah, good point, and also a very nice project, of course, to see delivered, also with the good help of Google. Very, very nice to see that progress in that space, and hopefully it will be beneficial to a lot of our of the community worldwide to seek further, project development, right? This is what we all want, because we want projects, we want to have people on those projects, and I guess, Cecilia, if you listen to this, and in terms of being as broad as possible, I think that's also what you're trying to achieve with NRU, right? I mean, this is what you want to do. You want to educate, you want to build that capacity around the core of someone's knowledge. How is it going so far?
Yeah, no, I think it is, it's going well, thank you. But I think it is true, like people we've been, I feel like when I was young, being like specialized was like the top, right? Being like the best of something. But we need to be more broad, more like octopuses, more like knowing how to handle different things,
Yeah.
and exactly just like doing different things. And that's why we believe in this upskilling. And from the top to the bottom, right? Like the C-level people know about different subjects, at least a little bit, and that the people that are starting also have different ideas, because there's so many things to do. That's also the thing. There's so many things to do, but if you don't know how to maybe help with an issue, that's also the other thing. Like I feel people, when they find something that makes them feel with a purpose, that gives you like a purpose, you give everything, right? You're more willing to learn, you're more willing to work hard and everything. So maybe they have already seen a problem or something, or maybe their community has geothermal resources, but they don't really know what to do with it, right? So I think there's a lot of opportunity, for example, also in startups. But in Mexico, the startup world is just starting, I would say.
That's how you start, yeah.
Yeah, but like in terms of, for
Yeah.
example, I feel it's my perception that in the United States, being an entrepreneur is like, whoa, right? You're an entrepreneur. And sometimes in Mexico, I feel it's like, oof, what do you eat? Kind of a thing.
Yes. Yeah.
So there would be, it would be amazing that there would be more support for some of these startups that are targeting geothermal. Like I saw a number recently that of like climate, how do you call, like acclimatation of spaces, no, using geothermal for heating, cooling. And apparently there's only about 15% of the households in Latin America have air conditioners, but that's expected to like quadruple or something for 2050. So there has to be people that know how to do this, or we're gonna end up with traditional air conditioners, which are terrible.
Yeah.
So we need people to, learn these skills and know that they exist, because that's also the problem. Like Malcolm said, it's not a technology, right? We don't need to invent a black thread. Maybe in some things, yes, yet. But in many things we don't. You just need to know it exists, and you need to feel that there's a way to do it, where you can find funding, who's people to knock. Like you guys were saying, no, maybe if hospitals are interested, then maybe you should learn about it, and then you go to hospitals and say, hey, I know how to do this, and it can help you with this and that. But if people don't know that it exists, it just makes it very unlikely.
True. And that's part of promotion, right? Yes, and visibility.
While we wait for a question, maybe I should tell the Black Swan story.
Well, I was just about to say, because I don't see any questions, and this is a perfect moment to move to the Black Swan.
Okay, well, great minds think alike. So as I mentioned, I worked on a team for our former employer. Meredith and I both worked for a very large oil and gas company, European-based Shell company. And I was a game changer for a while. And then when I left that program, I wanted to work in the new energy space in Shell. And Shell had chosen to focus their new energy business on wind, solar, batteries, biofuels, and hydrogen. That was the big five. Absent geothermal, absent nuclear, absent ocean energy, absent a whole bunch of other things. And when the company started up and I was leaving Game Changer, I presented to the leadership of that group that I understand focus. We talked about focus earlier, right? Not just universities, but employers also focus. And I said, that's fine, but understand that's creating blind spots for you. And the kind of innovation that I saw in Game Changer could happen outside of the big five that you're focusing on, and could completely torpedo your big five strategy. All of a sudden, geothermal could look so much better than wind, solar, batteries, biofuels, and hydrogen. And they said, okay, fine, that will be your job. And I made the presentation because I wanted that job. But that job was to stay outside of what everyone else was doing and look for those black swans that will come along and blindside the Shell strategy. Now, what is a black swan? COVID was a black swan. Black swans are big things that come along that no one expects, but when they come along, they make a huge change. And then the third characteristic, as it's been defined, is that once it happens, people say, "Oh, well, that was obvious all along. I knew that was going to happen eventually, right?" And so But anyway, so I gave myself the title Black Swan Detector because I again knew that titles mattered and what it says on your business card mattered. But it was to be out there and stay connected to the community outside the box, and then raise my hand when the time came to say, hey, by the way, innovation, this space is looking interesting. And so I did that actually near the end of my career at Shell. I raised my hand and said, you know what? I think closed loop geothermal is worth getting into and having, you know, closer connections, because I think it's going to make a big impact in the geothermal space. Might make it look better economically than it used to when you made the choice to exclude geothermal. And I said, by the way, small modular nuclear reactors are also making the nuclear space look very interesting. And we should at least be monitoring and not ignoring small modular nuclear reactors. And then also I found an ocean energy related thing, deep currents, Gulf Stream, Kyushu current kind of energy generation. And the answer from Shell was, oh, no, we can't give you any money. Our budgets are already allocated to the big five. We don't have any money for you. And I was like, well, wait a minute, why did you give me this job if you weren't going to allow me to have a little bit of money to sort of develop these ideas? And so I quit and became the evangelist. So, but anyway, the other part of that story is that I actually chose the Black Swan Detector title because it's also stands for the acronym BS Detector. And I chose BS Detector because that was the job, right? Finding out what was BS and what was real. And so I sort of had that double meaning in there. So I was the BS detector, really. So
it's a fantastic
anyways.
story. And look, Malcolm, geothermal in general, but maybe closed looping in your case, of course, specific, but it is a black swan, right? We are going to change the world, and everyone will say in a couple of years, yeah, I told you so, saw it coming.
Yeah,
of course.
yeah, I hope so.
You hope so. I hope so. Yes, this is what I wanted to hear. I hope so. Yes. Yes. All right. We have no more questions from the audience, and we're also almost at the hour. So maybe let's round this conversation off. Two things, and Cecilia, starting with you. If you want to make a change for LATAM, especially, of course, around geothermal and opening it up towards further work for early career, not just youth, but early career. You know, in your mind, what do we need to do collectively, right? Not just you with NRU, not just us three sitting here nicely in the Zoom room, but in general, what are the steps, right? And what are the priorities for the community to be more engaged, to be more involved, and to see more geothermal happening?
Well, I would say for everyone, if you know something about geothermal, I would say just talk to everyone. Talk to everyone and anyone you meet, you know, like I try to do it with almost everyone I meet. And there's been times when they're like, oh, I have hotels. Could I do that in my hotel? And then I'm like, yeah, surely, just talk to this person, you know? So the more you get involved, the more people you know, and the more you can refer and maybe also get involved into other projects. So I would just say, keep talking to people. You never know if you meet someone that knows someone that, you know, the world is small. So just keep talking, and maybe you also get someone interested, someone inspired, and maybe with kids, you know, just everyone. Just also get in there, start wherever you can. Like Malcolm said, maybe you know about geothermal, you live in a small town, go and ask the school if you can teach, you can give one conference, you know. Just start wherever you are. If you are in a position of decision, like decision making, well, even more so, you know, because your actions trickle down. So I would say that that's a big part. And for the community, well, it's that, right? If the people that know something about it make more of an effort to get it out there, then maybe more people will know about it, and communities will get interested, and more kids will choose these paths, and more early career people will say, oh yes, then maybe I can do this. Maybe it's not a traditional electricity generation, but I actually like more the heating and cooling. Or I am into greenhouses. Oh, maybe I can implement that. You know, everybody needs to know about it because geothermal applications are so broad. Yeah. So that's why I say you need to talk to everyone and anyone about it, right?
Yes. Awesome.
I can tell a story that relates to that. So as an evangelist, I do nothing but talking. right?
I was going to say, this is you, right?
Yeah, this is me, and Merritt knows that. But I'll give you an example of how that can pay off. So I've been working on this concept I call spindle hot. The concept is to drill in closed loop geothermal in salt domes, deeply rooted salt domes, and allow that salt to act as a heat conduit to the surface, because the heat conductivity of salt is 5 to 7 times that of sediment. And so I talk to everybody about that. Dinner parties, wherever I am, I'm always talking about, and even Zoom rooms like this one. So I had a person approach me who said, after one of these presentations, he said, you know what? I know a guy who's got a lease on a salt dome. He's an ex-oil and gas guy, and he might be interested. It's the Hockley Salt Dome that's right here in the Houston area. And it turns out that indeed he has a lease to produce energy from it. It's an active salt mine. And he has a well that has penetrated the salt dome and has proven that deeply rooted salt diapirs act as heat conduits. The background geothermal gradient is about 20 degrees C. The temperature gradient in that salt dome is over 40 degrees C per kilometer. And so we are advancing a project as rapidly as we can, because it all grew out of a random conversation with a random person who knew somebody, and we're off and running. So I think the other part of talking is doing, because if we can't do projects that we can point at and say, look at that one. Oh, look at Fervo's project in Nevada, feeding electricity to a data center for Google. All these sort of other things, and the hotels being fed in Japan in the onsen by heat underneath an onsen, et cetera, et cetera. We've got to get out there and do, even if it's small, even if it's the 3.5 megawatts that's being fed to Google by Fervo, small, but the first, and it's working, and we've got to get out there and do as much as talk.
Yeah, you're completely right. Like with the cooling and heating, I had a conversation with a cousin of all the random places, and he asked me about it. And then he asked me, oh, is there a place I can go and see how it works? And I was like, the places that do it, we cannot really access. So I agree, like there needs to be these, even if it's like small projects, like in The Hague, no, Mari, the hotel where we were talking, people that stay here should know, that this is geothermally heated and cooled. So even if it's a small thing, it definitely helps. Or like with the greenhouses, no, some place that already uses it. So I totally agree. And this is something that Andy Blair told me as well. Like, yes, I love the talk. Yes, I love the ideas, but get out and do at least one, like people have to get out and just start acting, because if not, it's not, then you start a little like snowball like that, right?
Yeah.
So I totally agree.
Hey, for sure, and a perfect, let's say, ending as well towards almost the hour. We have to spread the word, and we have to do. As this is also intentionally for our younger group of people, they always are interested in your specific advice in terms of how to navigate your career. So maybe to round off this entire episode, Malcolm first, and then Cecilia to round it off, and then I close out. But what would be your advice? You are a young person now, you're studying maybe geosciences, you have a whole life in front of you. What's your advice, Malcolm, to those folks out there?
Don't be scared of change. So everyone thinks of me as a geoscientist, but in fact, I got a PhD in geoscience and then didn't do geoscience for about 15 years in my career. I did a startup. I was in software sales and in training. Then I got into GIS, and then I got working for Shell. And our early professionals should expect to have 3 to 5 careers. I don't want to necessarily say careers, but 3 to 5 different, kinds of jobs, because that's the way the marketplace is these days. You're not going to work for one company for 40 years anymore. And so don't get stuck in a rut where you think that what I do in college is what I'm going to do the rest of my life. Not so. Be a lifetime learner so that you can make these pivots. I taught myself GIS. Now I teach GIS, right? You've got to be a learner so that you can continue to evolve.
Awesome. Thank you. Cecilia.
Yeah, I guess I would continue on that. Like, just don't be afraid to try new things. Like one of my ex-bosses told me is like, don't be afraid to get a job that maybe you don't feel prepared for. You will learn because you will continually learn. And that's good, right? We should we should definitely keep learning because the world is just changing so fast. So just explore different things, like for example, GIS, no, and data science. These things will help you in any job. So, and having it in your curriculum will be great. So I would say maybe look into those type of things that will give you an edge when you apply for any type of work. And look for what you like. I would like to insist on that because I do feel when people do what they like, you just do it better. And it's not because, oh, you love it. And I think it's because you will support the grind more because you like what the end of it is, right? So keep looking. That's also why you have to keep learning because maybe you will find what you really love in not today, maybe you'll find it in 5 years or whatever. So you have to keep trying new things. So I would just add with that and yeah, don't be afraid to be the first one.
Cool. Awesome. Well, it's now my time to close. First of all, Cecilia, Malcolm, thank you so much for your time today, but in general for all your efforts, right? I know both of you already a long time, and I have the utmost respect for both of you in terms of spreading the word and doing in whatever capacity what you can in order to raise the awareness and promote the diversity of geothermal worldwide. But I specifically thank you for coming over to our third episode for the Young Energy Talks. This is important. It is a super important part of our membership globally that wants to advance and that wants to tackle climate change in general, but also wants to see themselves work in this space, and hence creating further projects and to making people aware of them and knocking on every door, right, Cecilia? And being the evangelist, right, Malcolm? This is what we need. So thank you both. Also, thank you for those who joined us today. It was very nice to have you here. And we are going to come back in the new year in 24 in January with our fourth episode. Both the panelists are to be announced, so watch our space. With that, I wish you all a very good remainder of the day, of the night, of your morning, wherever you are in the world. But from our behalf, of IG's behalf, thank you very much for joining, and see you soon, and stay safe. Bye-bye.
Happy
Thank you very
holidays
much.
to everyone.
Yes,
Yes.
happy holiday, for sure.
Bye. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.